The millionaire's son had given up on medicine until a street kid appeared and healed him. Ethan Parker hadn't been able to move his legs for 6 long months, but the most complex medical exams showed no physical injury to justify it. Specialists spoke of psychological block, emotional trauma, post-traumatic shock, but no treatment worked. It all started when he was alone in that operating room. It was his first time operating without direct supervision, a boy of just 7 years old on the table, and things spiraled out of control so fast that Ethan didn't even have time to process it. When it was all over, when the other doctors rushed in and took over, it was already too late. The boy didn't make it. Ethan left that room staggering, arrived home and simply couldn't get out of bed the next day. In the first few days, everyone thought it was fatigue, exhaustion. But when a week passed and Ethan still couldn't move his legs, his father, Richard Parker, one of the richest businessmen in Boston, panicked. He called the best neurologists, physical therapists, psychiatrists. They all ran the same tests, reached the same conclusion. There was nothing wrong with Ethan's legs. The problem was in his mind. "Your son needs to want to walk again," said the latest psychiatrist, a woman with graying hair and thin glasses. "His body is refusing to function because his mind hasn't processed the trauma." Richard slammed his fist on the office desk, making the doctor jump. "Then tell me how to make my son want to walk. Tell me how much it costs." "It's not a matter of money, Mr. Parker. It's a matter of time and emotional work." But Richard wouldn't accept that answer. He had never accepted that something couldn't be solved with money. He had built an empire from scratch, turning a small construction company inherited from his father into one of the largest real estate conglomerates in the northeast of the country. For him, every problem had a price for its solution. Ethan spent hours looking out his bedroom window, watching the vast garden of the mansion where they lived. The property was in one of the most upscale neighborhoods of Boston, surrounded by high walls and electronic gates. He used to run through that garden as a child, play ball with the employees' children, climb the ancient trees. Now he could barely drag himself from the bed to the wheelchair. The housekeeper, Mrs. Margaret, a short woman of nearly 60 who had worked for the family for decades, was the one who took care of him most of the time. She brought his meals, helped with his bath, pushed the wheelchair to the garden when Ethan asked, but even her affection wasn't enough to lift the weight Ethan felt in his chest. "Son, you need to try," Mrs. Margaret would say while arranging the pillows. "You need to make an effort. Believe that you can do it." "I've already tried, Mrs. Margaret," Ethan would reply, his voice tired. "It's no use. My legs won't obey." And it was true. Ethan had tried countless times in the first few months. He would concentrate, mentally command his muscles to move, imagine himself getting up, taking steps. Nothing happened. It was as if there was an invisible wall between his will and his body. The days dragged on the same. Ethan would wake up, have breakfast in bed, sit in his chair watching the garden, have lunch, continue watching the garden, have dinner, and go back to bed. Sometimes his father would appear, always in a hurry, always with his phone glued to his ear, always talking about a new treatment he had discovered, a new specialist coming from New York City or Los Angeles. "This one is different, Ethan," Richard would say, showing his phone with a picture of some famous doctor. "He's treated cases just like yours, impossible cases that he cured." But Ethan no longer responded. He would just shrug and go back to looking out the window. It was on a Tuesday morning, 3 days after completing 6 months in the wheelchair, that everything changed. Mrs. Margaret had pushed Ethan to the garden, as she did every morning when the weather was nice. The September sun was beginning to warm up, and the grass was green and well maintained by the gardeners Richard kept. Ethan was alone near the jaboticaba trees when he heard a thin, almost childlike voice. "Mister, do you have a piece of bread?" He turned the wheelchair and got a fright. A boy was standing a few meters away. He couldn't have been more than 8 years old, was too thin for his age, wearing a faded orange t-shirt and torn jean shorts. His feet were bare and dirty with soil. The boy's dark skin was marked by scratches on his arms and legs. "How did you get in here?" asked Ethan, looking around to see if Mrs. Margaret or any security was nearby. "I jumped the wall back there," said the boy, pointing to the back of the property where there were tall trees. "Sorry, mister, but I'm really hungry. Ethan didn't know what to do. Should he call someone? But the boy seemed so small, so fragile, that he posed no danger. "Wait here," said Ethan, turning the chair toward the house. "Can't you walk?" asked the boy, with that natural curiosity of children. Ethan stopped. For some reason, the boy's direct question didn't bother him like adults' questions usually did. "I can't," he replied simply. "Why?" "It's complicated." "Was it an accident?" "Sort of." The boy approached, examining the wheelchair with interest. "I know how to make you walk again," he said with surprising conviction. Ethan almost laughed, but something in the boy's serious face stopped him. "Really? And how do you know that?" "Because I've seen it before. My grandpa had the same problem as you." Before Ethan could respond, Mrs. Margaret came running from the house, all alarmed. "Good heavens! Who is this boy? How did he get in here?" She grabbed the boy's arm, pulling him away from Ethan. "Let go, Ma'am. I didn't do anything. You trespassed on private property. I'm calling security." "Wait, Mrs. Margaret," said Ethan, surprising himself. "Let him stay. He'll just eat something and leave." Mrs. Margaret looked at Ethan as if he had gone mad. "Ethan, this boy is a stranger. He came in by jumping the wall. He could be dangerous." "Look at him, Mrs. Margaret. He's a hungry child. He won't do any harm." The housekeeper hesitated, but she had known Ethan since he was a baby. She knew that in the last few months the young man had barely shown interest in anything. Seeing him defend someone, even if it was a street kid, was the first sign of life in half a year. "All right," she grumbled, "but I'll keep an eye out." She went back to the house and returned minutes later with a plate full of bread, cheese, and fruit. The boy ate with a voracity that broke Ethan's heart. How long had it been since he'd eaten properly? "What's your name?" asked Ethan. "Tyler," replied the boy with his mouth full. "And yours?" "Ethan." "Nice to meet you, Mr. Ethan." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out now continuing. When Tyler finished eating, Ethan expected him to leave, but the boy stayed there, sitting on the grass, looking at Ethan with those big, curious eyes. "So, Mr. Ethan, do you want me to teach you how to walk again?" Ethan sighed. He didn't want to be rude to the child, but this was ridiculous. "Tyler, I've been through every possible treatment. Doctors, physical therapists, psychologists, nothing worked. But none of them knew my grandpa's trick." "What trick?" Tyler stood up and walked until he was right in front of Ethan. "My grandpa always said that we can only do things when we have a good reason to do them. It's no use wanting to walk just because. You have to have a strong why." "And you think I don't have reasons to want to walk?" asked Ethan, feeling a stab of irritation. "I think you're afraid to walk," said Tyler, with that brutal honesty of children. The words hit Ethan like a punch in the stomach. Could the boy be right? Could part of him not want to walk because walking meant going back to being a doctor, going back to that hospital, going back to facing what had happened? "You don't know me," said Ethan, trying to sound firm, but his voice came out shaky. "That's true," agreed Tyler. "But my grandpa always said that sometimes we see things more clearly from the outside than from the inside." Ethan didn't answer. He kept looking at the boy, trying to understand how a street kid could be so sure about things that the best specialists in the country couldn't solve. "You know what my grandpa did when he couldn't walk?" continued Tyler. "He started small. He didn't try to get up right away. He started by moving just one little toe, then another, then the whole foot. He took it slow, you know. And it worked for your grandpa." "It worked. It took almost a year, but it worked." Ethan felt something strange stir inside him. It wasn't hope, exactly. It was more like a very small spark of curiosity, and he hadn't felt curious about anything for so long. "All right," he said. "You can try to teach me, but I'm not promising anything." Tyler's face lit up with a huge smile. "I'll come back tomorrow. Promise you won't have me arrested?" "I promise." Tyler ran toward the back of the property, climbed the wall with impressive agility, and disappeared on the other side. Ethan stayed there alone in the garden, with the strange feeling that something had changed. He didn't quite know what, but something was different. When Mrs. Margaret came back to get him, He was looking at his own feet, trying to feel something, anything. "That boy is a case," said the housekeeper. "I hope he doesn't come back." "I asked him to come back," said Ethan. Mrs. Margaret stopped pushing the wheelchair. "What? Ethan, have you lost your mind? Your father will have a fit if he finds out." "Then don't tell him." "But Ethan, please, Mrs. Margaret, it's the first time in months that I've felt something. Let the boy come back." The housekeeper looked at Ethan's face and saw something there she hadn't seen in a long time, a spark in his eyes. She sighed deeply. "All right, but this stays between us. If your father finds out, I'll lose my job." "Thank you, Mrs. Margaret." That night, for the first time in 6 months, Ethan couldn't sleep for a reason different from his usual anguish. He kept thinking about what Tyler had said. Start small, one toe at a time. Could it work? He tried to focus on the big toe of his right foot. He imagined the toe moving, ordered it to move, prayed for it to move. Nothing happened. He tried for an hour, 2 hours. When the sun began to rise, he gave up and finally fell asleep. Tyler came back the next day, promptly at 9 in the morning. Mrs. Margaret let him in through the front gate this time, after checking that Richard had already left for work. "Good morning, Mr. Ethan," said the boy, all excited. "Ready to start?" Ethan was in the garden again, in the same chair, in the same spot, but today he was a little less resigned, a little more present. "Ready," he said. Tyler sat on the grass and took a small stone out of his pocket. "First thing, we're going to do a feeling exercise. I'm going to put this little stone on your foot, and you're going to try to feel it. You don't need to move anything, just feel." He placed the little stone on top of Ethan's right foot, over the sneaker. Ethan closed his eyes and tried to concentrate. At first, he felt absolutely nothing. But Tyler stayed there, quietly waiting, and gradually Ethan began to notice something. It was hard to tell if it was real or imagination, but it seemed like he could feel a minimal weight there. "I think I feel something," he said, his voice uncertain. "Great. Now I'm going to move the little stone. Tell me when you feel it move." Tyler slowly dragged the little stone across Ethan's sneaker, and to both of their surprise, Ethan was able to identify when it moved. "It's moving, it's going to the left side." "That's right," shouted Tyler, all excited. They spent the whole morning doing this exercise. Tyler brought little stones of different sizes, dry leaves, a feather he found in the garden. With each object, Ethan tried to feel the weight, the texture, the movement, and gradually he really started to feel. Mrs. Margaret watched from afar, from the kitchen window, unable to believe what she was seeing. Ethan was smiling. Smiling for real, not that forced smile he gave when she tried to cheer him up. A genuine smile. "Tomorrow we'll try to move a little toe," said Tyler, as the morning was already ending. "But just a little bit, okay? No rush." "No rush," repeated Ethan. When Tyler left, Ethan was alone in the garden again. But this time, he wasn't just staring into space. He was thinking, processing, feeling. For the first time in 6 months, he had something to look forward to the next day. The following days followed a similar pattern. Tyler arrived in the morning, always with some new object for the exercises, always with funny stories about things he saw on the street. He told about the time he saw a man arguing with a lamppost, thinking it was a person, about a lady who fed pigeons every day in the square, about a dog that followed him for 3 blocks before giving up. Ethan discovered that laughing was harder than he imagined. In the first days, he forced polite laughs so as not to disappoint Tyler, but over time, the boy's stories really started to amuse him, and when he finally managed to laugh for real, he felt as if something stuck inside him had loosened a bit. The attempts to move his toes were frustrating. Ethan spent hours concentrating, sweating from mental effort, and nothing happened. Tyler didn't seem to mind the lack of progress. "My grandpa took 3 months just to move the first toe," the boy said. "We're going pretty fast. But I haven't moved anything yet." "But you're already feeling. That's halfway there." One of the mornings, when Tyler was telling a story about an ice cream vendor who sang opera, Ethan felt something different. It was just a second. A tremor so small, he almost thought he had imagined it. But his right big toe had moved. He was sure of it. "Tyler, wait," he said, interrupting the story. I think I managed to move it. Really? Try again. Ethan closed his eyes, took a deep breath, focused every bit of his mind on that toe. And it happened again. A minimal movement, almost imperceptible but real. I saw it! I saw it! Shouted Tyler, jumping for joy. Mrs. Margaret came running from the house to see what was happening. When Ethan showed her, moving the toe with difficulty but undeniably moving, the housekeeper started to cry. My boy did it. It was just a toe, Mrs. Margaret, said Ethan, but he was smiling. One toe today, the whole foot tomorrow, and before you know it, you'll be running around, said Tyler, with that unshakable certainty he had about everything. That night, when Richard came back from work, Mrs. Margaret told him about Ethan's progress. The businessman was silent for a long moment. And you're saying it was a street kid who managed this? A kid who probably never even went to school? Yes, Mr. Richard. The boy has a special way with Ethan. I want to meet this boy, said Richard, still skeptical. The next day, when Tyler arrived, he found not only Ethan in the garden, but also a tall man in a grey suit, with a serious face and crossed arms. You must be Tyler, said Richard, examining the boy from head to toe. Yes, sir, replied Tyler, a bit intimidated. My housekeeper told me you're helping my son. Is that true? I'm trying, sir. And why are you doing this? Tyler thought for a moment before answering. Because your Ethan gave me food when I was hungry, and because I know what it's like not to be able to do something that everyone else finds easy. Richard studied the boy for another moment, then turned to Ethan. Do you really want to continue with this? I do, Dad. And you think this method will work? I moved a finger. I hadn't moved anything in 6 months, and now I moved a finger. So yes, I think it might work. Richard sighed, running his hand through his greying hair. All right, but on one condition. You, he said, pointing at Tyler, will stay in the guest house on the property. I don't want you jumping the fence every day. And you'll take a shower, get a haircut, and wear decent clothes. Understood? Tyler's eyes widened. Are you serious? I never say anything I don't mean. Do you accept or not? I accept. Of course I accept. And so Tyler came to live on the Parker property. The guest house was small, just a room with a bathroom, but for a boy who slept in squares and under marquees, it felt like a palace. Mrs. Margaret cared for him as if he were a grandson, bathing him, cutting his hair, buying new clothes. You look handsome, Tyler, said Ethan when he saw the boy all cleaned up. I feel weird, admitted Tyler, tugging at the collar of his new shirt. But it's good, it's really good. With Tyler living there, the exercises intensified. They spent entire mornings and afternoons working. Tyler came up with different games every day. One day he brought an abandoned puppy he found on the street. Look, Mr. Ethan, he's all hurt. We have to take care of him. The little puppy was a small mutt with caramel-colored fur and one of its paws bandaged. Tyler placed it in Ethan's lap. But I don't know how to take care of a dog, said Ethan, holding the animal carefully. But you're a doctor. Doctors know how to take care of everything. It's not quite like that, Tyler. I take care of people, not animals. But both have bodies, both feel pain. It must be similar, right? Ethan looked at the little puppy who stared back at him with those sad eyes. Something inside him stirred. It was the first time since the surgery accident that someone called him a doctor, and he didn't feel like running away. All right, let's take care of him. They took the dog inside the house, and Ethan asked Mrs. Margaret to bring his first aid kit. When she brought it, Ethan opened the box with trembling hands. He hadn't touched those things since the day of the accident. You can do it, Mr. Ethan, said Tyler beside him. Ethan picked up the scissors and began cutting the dirty cloth wrapped around the dog's paw. The wound underneath wasn't serious, just a superficial cut that was already starting to heal. He cleaned it, applied antiseptic, and put on a new bandage. And throughout the whole process, his hands didn't tremble once. When he finished, he looked at his own hands as if seeing them for the first time. I did it, he murmured. So of course you did, said Tyler, smiling. You never stopped being a doctor. You were just afraid to remember that you were. Those words echoed in Ethan's head for days. Could Tyler be right? Could the problem not be that he couldn't be a doctor, but that he was afraid to be? The little puppy, whom they named Rusty, recovered quickly under Ethan's care. And something curious happened. The more Ethan cared for the animal, the more his feet responded to the exercises. It was as if caring for another living being had rewired something inside him. "See," said Tyler, when Ethan managed to move all the toes on both feet. "When we have a reason to do things, the body listens better." Margaret was impressed with the progress. She called the physical therapist who had treated Ethan before, Jessica Williams, and told her about Tyler's methods. "That's interesting," said Jessica when she came to visit. "It's an unconventional approach, but it's clearly working. Can I try incorporating some of these techniques into the official treatment?" "Of course," said Ethan, "but Tyler participates too." Deal. Jessica started coming 3 times a week, and the sessions became a mix of traditional physical therapy with Tyler's inventive games. In 1 month, Ethan could move his ankles. In 2 months, his calves began to respond, but not everything was linear progress. There were bad days, days when Ethan woke up and couldn't move anything, as if he had gone back to square one. On those days, Tyler would sit beside him and tell stories. "You know, Mr. Ethan, when I was really little, I had a brother. He was older than me by about 3 years, and we were really close, you know. Slept together, ate together, went out on the street to ask for food together." Ethan had never heard Tyler talk about family. "What happened to him?" "He got sick. It was really fast. In a week, he wasn't here anymore. And after he was gone, I couldn't do anything for a long time. I'd just stay in a corner, not eating, not drinking water properly. The other kids on the street took care of me." "I'm sorry, Tyler." That's when I understood something. We stop working when we lose something really important. Our bodies kind of give up, you know. But if we find a new reason, a new thing to care for, then the body starts working again. And did you find a new reason? I did. I met my grandpa, who also lived on the street. He taught me everything I know. He taught me that we can always help someone, no matter how little we have. And when he couldn't walk anymore, I helped him, just like I'm helping you now. Ethan fell silent, processing that. An 8-year-old boy had suffered more than he probably would in his entire life, and yet had found the strength to help other people. That made him feel ashamed of his own weakness. "I have to tell you something, Tyler," said Ethan after a long silence. "The reason I can't walk, what really happened." And for the first time since the accident, Ethan told the whole story. He talked about the boy on the operating table, about how things got out of control, about how he couldn't save him, about the guilt he carried every day. Tyler listened to everything in silence, and when Ethan finished, the boy took his hand. "It wasn't your fault, Mr. Ethan. You did the best you could. But it wasn't enough. Sometimes we do everything right and things still go wrong. My grandpa always said life is like that. But I'm a doctor. I should have saved him. You're not God, Mr. Ethan. You're just a doctor. A really good doctor, I'm sure, but still human. And humans make mistakes, humans fail, and that's okay." Those words, coming from a child who had every reason in the world to be bitter and resentful, touched Ethan in a way no therapy had managed. He cried. He cried like he hadn't cried since the day of the accident. And Tyler stayed there, holding his hand, letting him cry. When the tears finally stopped, Ethan felt lighter. Not healed, not whole, but a little less broken. "Thank you, Tyler." "You're welcome, Mr. Ethan. That's what friends are for." And it was there that Ethan realized that was what Tyler was to him, a friend, perhaps the best friend he had ever had in his life. The months went by, and Ethan's progress continued. Slowly, with many ups and downs, but it continued. He managed to move his knees, then his thighs. Jessica was impressed. "Honestly, Ethan, when you came to me a few months ago, I thought it would take years for you to have any kind of mobility. But you're proving all the predictions wrong." "It's not me," said Ethan. "It's Tyler." "It's the combination of you two," corrected Jessica. "His technique works because you believe in it. That's the foundation of all healing, believing it's possible." Richard watched everything from afar, still skeptical, but unable to deny the results. His son was getting better, and that was what mattered. But the businessman had other problems piling up. The company was facing difficulties. Some poor investment decisions in recent years had compromised the capital. Richard had bet heavily on a real estate venture that didn't work out, and now he was having to sell properties to cover the debts. He didn't tell anyone about this, kept up appearances, continued wearing expensive suits and driving imported cars. But at night, alone in the office, he looked at the red numbers in the spreadsheets and felt panic tighten his chest. Mrs. Margaret noticed something was wrong. She had known Richard long enough to notice when he was worried, but when she tried to ask, he brushed it off. "Everything's fine, Margaret. Just business matters. Mr. Richard, if you need to talk—" "I don't need to. Take care of my son, that's what matters now. That's what—" But things kept getting worse. One day a man showed up at the mansion. It was Lawrence Wilson, Richard's former partner, someone he had cut ties with years ago after a disagreement about the company's direction. "Richard, my old friend," said Lawrence, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I heard you're facing some difficulties." "I don't know where you got that information," replied Richard, tense. "Well, the business world is small. Everyone knows everything. And I came to make a proposal." "I'm not interested in your proposals." "Won't you even listen? I'm willing to buy this property. I'll pay in cash. It solves your problems immediately." "This house is not for sale." "Everything is for sale, Richard. It's just a matter of price, and by my calculations, you'll need to sell something big soon, or the debts will swallow you up." Richard wanted to throw Lawrence out right then, but he knew the man was right. The situation was becoming unsustainable. But selling the mansion, the house where Ethan had grown up, where he was recovering, he couldn't do that. "I'll think about your proposal," he said, just to get rid of Lawrence. "Don't take too long. My patience has limits, as does my interest in helping you." When Lawrence left, Richard locked himself in the office. How had things come to this? He, who had always been so careful, so meticulous in business, was now on the brink of financial ruin. Ethan noticed something was wrong when, during dinner, his father barely touched his food. Richard never skipped a meal, no matter how stressed he was. "Dad, is everything okay?" "Yes, it is. Just tired from work." "Are you sure? You seem worried." Richard looked at his son, saw him sitting there in the wheelchair, but with much more life in his eyes than he had had a few months ago. He couldn't dump his problems on Ethan now, not when he was progressing so well. "Everything's under control, son. Don't worry." But Ethan knew he was lying. He knew his father well enough to know when something was bothering him, and that wasn't just tiredness, it was something bigger. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing, it was Tyler who discovered what was happening. The boy had a habit of waking up early and walking through the garden before everyone else got up. One such morning, he heard voices coming from Richard's office. The window was slightly open, and Tyler, not meaning to spy but unable to avoid hearing, caught part of a phone conversation. "I know the deadline is approaching." "Yes, I'm aware of the consequences." "No, I haven't decided what to do yet. I need more time." Richard's voice sounded desperate, broken. Tyler had never heard that confident man sound like that before. When Ethan woke up, Tyler told him what he had heard. "I think your dad has money problems, Mr. Ethan." "That can't be. My father is rich." "Being rich and having money aren't always the same thing. At least that's what my grandpa used to say. He knew people on the street who were once rich and lost everything." Ethan became thoughtful. It made sense. The last few months had been so focused on his recovery that he hadn't paid attention to anything else. When was the last time he had seen his father truly at ease? "I need to talk to him," said Ethan. That night, Ethan asked Margaret to take him to his father's office. Richard was there, as always, surrounded by papers and looking like he hadn't slept in days. "Ethan, it's late. You should be sleeping." "Dad, you need to tell me what's going on." "Nothing's going on." "Dad, please, I'm not a child anymore. If there's a problem, I can help." Richard looked at his son, At this young man he had protected so much his entire life, and something inside him gave way. He was too tired to keep pretending everything was fine. "The company is in trouble, Ethan. Serious trouble." And then he told him everything. The poor investment decisions, the growing debts, the properties he had already sold, Lawrence's offer to buy the mansion. "Why didn't you tell me before?" asked Ethan, shocked. "Because you were already going through so much. I didn't want to burden you with more problems." "But I'm your son. We should face this together." "You're in a wheelchair, Ethan. How could I involve you in this?" The words came out harsher than Richard intended, and he immediately regretted it. But Ethan wasn't offended. Instead, something inside him ignited, a determination he hadn't felt in months. "You're right," he said. "I'm in a wheelchair, but I won't be forever, and when I get out of it, I'm going to help you fix this." "Ethan." "No, Dad. You've been helping me with my recovery without asking for anything in return. Now it's my turn to repay you. We'll find a solution together." Richard felt his eyes well up. It had been so long since he had seen that determined son, that Ethan who had always been so strong, so decisive. "Thank you, son." That night, Ethan barely slept. His mind was buzzing with possibilities. He was a doctor. He had knowledge. He had skills. There must be some way to use that to help his father. In the morning, he called Tyler and Jessica for a conversation. "I have an idea," he said, "and I'm going to need both of your help." "What are you thinking?" asked Tyler. "I want to start seeing patients again, but not at the hospital, not yet. Here in the garden. I can do basic consultations, health guidance, primary care." "But you're still recovering," said Jessica. "Exactly because of that. People will see that I'm recovering while helping them. It'll be inspiring. And I can charge affordable rates, help those who can't afford a regular private doctor." "And how will that help your dad?" asked Tyler. "If I can build a reputation as a doctor again, I might eventually return to a hospital, earn my own money, help with the household expenses. But more importantly, it will remind me why I became a doctor. It will make me go back to who I was before the accident." Jessica and Tyler exchanged a look, then smiled. "I think it's a great idea," said the physical therapist. "Me too," Tyler agreed. "And I can help. I can pick up patients, organize the line, things like that." Exactly what I was thinking. Richard, when he heard the idea, was torn. On one hand, he was proud to see his son wanting to help. On the other, he was afraid it was too soon, that Ethan might harm himself by trying to do too much too fast. "Son, are you sure about this?" "I am, Dad. I need to do this. For me and for you. But what if something goes wrong again? What if you can't handle it? Then I'll fail. But at least I'll have tried. And I think that's what I need to try again." In the end, Richard couldn't say no. After all, who was he to stop his son from trying to rebuild himself? The news that the doctor from the mansion was seeing patients in the garden spread quickly through the surrounding community. Tyler went around the neighborhood spreading the word, and soon people started showing up. The first patient was an elderly lady with back pain. Ethan examined her from his wheelchair, asked the right questions, gave the appropriate advice. When the woman left, relieved and grateful, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: professional satisfaction. "I had forgotten how good it feels to help someone," he said to Tyler. "My grandpa always said that we only feel whole when we're being useful to someone." "Your grandfather was a wise man." "He really was. I wish you could have met him." The number of patients kept growing. Some days there were 5, other days 10. Ethan saw them all with patience, even when he was tired, even when his legs ached from physical therapy exercises. And the most surprising thing, the more patients he saw, the more his legs responded. "It's like I said," Tyler commented, "when we have a strong reason to move, the body obeys." Jessica incorporated the patient visits into Ethan's treatment. She had him stretch before each consultation session, checked his posture in the chair, made sure he wasn't pushing himself too hard. "You're progressing incredibly fast now," she said. "I think in a matter of months you'll be able to start trying to take your first steps with support." The idea of walking again, which once seemed impossible, now felt real. Ethan allowed himself to dream about it. He imagined himself getting up from the chair, taking steps, walking through the garden, returning to the hospital. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Lawrence Wilson showed up again, this time with papers claiming that Richard had old debts with him that were never settled. "These are fake documents," Richard said, examining the papers. "I never owed you this." "The courts will decide that," Lawrence replied with that cruel smile. "And in the meantime I can request a freeze on your assets, including this property." "You won't get that." "We'll see. I have good lawyers." When Lawrence left, Richard slammed the papers on the table so hard that some flew around the office. Ethan was there, had witnessed everything. "That man is dangerous, Dad." "I know. He always has been. I should have distanced myself from him sooner." "What are we going to do?" "I'll look for a lawyer, but it's going to cost money I don't have." That's when Ethan had another idea. What if we turned part of the mansion into a clinic, an official community clinic? We could ask for donations, partner with companies, create a legitimate source of income. Richard blinked, processing the suggestion. That could work. But we would need permits, licenses, initial investment. I can try to get them. I have some medical school colleagues who work with social projects. I can talk to them. For the first time in weeks, Richard saw a glimmer of hope. It wasn't a magical solution, but it was a start. Ethan started making calls. He contacted former professors, classmates, even that department head who had supervised him at the hospital. Most were surprised to hear from him after so long, but all were willing to help once they understood the project. "Ethan, this is admirable," said one of his former professors, "and I know of a foundation that might be interested in supporting it. Let me talk to them." Tyler helped however he could. He knew many people in the community, knew what the most urgent needs were, which illnesses were most common. He became a kind of unofficial social assistant for the project. "There are a lot of people who need a doctor, but don't have the money to pay," he explained to Ethan. "Some have had problems for months and don't seek help because they think they won't be able to afford it." Then it's exactly for those people that we're going to work. The days became fuller, more hectic. Ethan saw patients in the morning, had online meetings about the clinic project in the afternoon, continued with his physical therapy at the end of the day. He was exhausted, but it was a good kind of tiredness, the tiredness of someone who is living again, not just existing, and his legs kept improving. One day, during a session with Jessica, she asked him to try to put weight on his legs while she held him by the arms. Ethan mentally prepared himself, took a deep breath, and pushed. His legs trembled, but they held. For 3 full seconds, he stood, supported by Jessica, but standing. When he sat back down in the chair, he was crying. Tyler, who was watching everything, was also crying. Even Jessica, professional and reserved, had tears in her eyes. "You did it, Mr. Ethan. You managed to stand." "It was only 3 seconds, said Ethan, but he was smiling through the tears. "Today 3 seconds, next week 10, next month you'll be walking," said Tyler, with that unshakable certainty that was his trademark. Mrs. Margaret, when she found out, threw a little party. She prepared Ethan's favorite dish, called Richard to come home for dinner early, decorated the table with flowers from the garden. It was a small celebration, but meaningful. "I'm proud of you, son," said Richard, and for the first time in years, Ethan saw genuine emotion on his father's face. "Thank you, Dad. But I couldn't have done it without Tyler." Tyler blushed at the compliment. He wasn't used to positive attention. "I just did what my grandpa taught me." "Your grandfather must have been a very special person," said Richard. "He was. He used to say that everyone has something to teach, no matter how poor or rich they are. The difference between people isn't money, it's the heart." The boy's words hung in the air. Richard, who had always measured the world by money and success, felt something shift inside him. Maybe he had spent his whole life focusing on the wrong things. Meanwhile, the clinic project was moving forward. The foundation Ethan's former professor had mentioned showed real interest. They sent a representative to visit the property, see how the garden consultations worked, talk to the patients. "Impressive," said the man, a middle-aged gentleman with glasses. You've managed to create a model of humanized care that is exactly what we're looking to support." "So you can help?" asked Ethan, hopefully. "We can. Not with a fortune, but with enough for you to structure a small clinic here on the property. And we can help with the permits too. We have contacts that can speed up the process." Ethan could barely contain his emotion. This was real. It was happening. When he told his father, Richard was stunned. "You did it. You actually did it." "We did it, Dad. Me, you, Tyler, Margaret, Jessica. It was everyone together." The news about the clinic spread, and offers of help started coming from unexpected places. A local businessman offered to donate equipment. A pharmacy committed to providing medications at cost. Even some of Ethan's former colleagues volunteered to help with patient care. But not everything was celebration. Lawrence Wilson found out about the project and showed up once again. "Very creative, Richard," he said sarcastically, "but it won't work. You still owe me and I'll collect every penny. Your claims are false and you know it. Prove it." The confrontation was heating up when Ethan, who was in the garden with Tyler, heard the raised voices. He signaled for Tyler to push the wheelchair to where the two men were standing. "You must be the son," said Lawrence, looking at Ethan with disdain. "The invalid doctor who thinks he'll save his father by setting up a backyard clinic." "And you must be the man trying to steal from my family," Ethan replied, keeping his voice calm. "Steal? I'm just collecting what I'm owed." "With fake documents? You can't prove they're fake." "Not yet," said Ethan, "but we will prove it, and when we do, you'll regret threatening my family." Lawrence laughed, but it was a humorless laugh. "Bold kid, but courage doesn't pay debts." When he left, Richard knelt beside Ethan's wheelchair. "You didn't have to do that. He's dangerous." "So what? We are too, in our own way." Tyler, who had watched everything in silence, finally spoke. "My grandpa used to say the dogs that bark the loudest are always the most scared. I think that man is scared of you." "Scared of us?" asked Richard, incredulous. "Of course, you're standing up doing good things, helping people. People like that always bother the bad ones, because it shows there's another way to live." Ethan smiled. Tyler had that way of simplifying complex things that always surprised him. "You know, Tyler, I think your grandpa was right about that too." The following weeks were intense. The clinic permits started coming through, the donated equipment arrived, the guest house was transformed into a small medical office, and Ethan kept improving. He could stand for longer periods. First 30 seconds, then a minute, then 5 minutes. Jessica was impressed with the progress. "Honestly, Ethan, I've never seen such a rapid recovery from such severe psychological block. You're making medical history here." "It's not me," Ethan insisted. "It's Tyler. It's having a purpose. It's helping other people." Maybe it's all of that together. One day, 3 months after Ethan and Tyler first met, the moment everyone had been waiting for arrived. Jessica set up parallel bars in the garden. Those bars patients use to learn to walk again. "Today we're going to try taking a step," she announced. Ethan looked at the parallel bars with a mixture of excitement and terror. "What if I can't?" "Then we try again tomorrow," said Tyler beside him. "No rush, remember." "No rush," Ethan repeated. Jessica and Tyler helped Ethan stand and hold onto the parallel bars. His legs trembled with the effort of supporting his own weight, but they held. He stood there for 1 minute, 2 minutes, getting used to the feeling of standing without direct support from anyone. "Now," said Jessica, "you're going to let go with one hand and try to move your right leg forward. You don't need to lift it high off the ground, just slide it if you need to." Ethan took a deep breath. He let go of the left handrail, keeping only his right hand holding on. And then, concentrating every ounce of strength he had, he tried to move his right leg. It moved. Just a few inches, but it moved. Ethan had taken a step. Tyler shouted with joy. Mrs. Margaret, who was watching from the kitchen window, began to cry. Jessica had the biggest smile Ethan had ever seen on her. "You did it! Oh my God, you did it!" Ethan looked at his own leg as if he couldn't believe it had obeyed the command. 6 months ago, he thought he would never walk again. And now he had taken a step. "I did it," he murmured, almost in shock. "Tyler, I did it." "I always knew you would," said the boy with that huge smile. Richard came home from work later and found everyone in the garden, celebrating. When they told him what had happened, the businessman bent down and hugged his son so hard he almost knocked him off the parallel bars. "I'm so proud of you," he said, his voice choked. "So proud. Thank you, Dad, for believing in me, for letting Tyler stay, for everything." That night, for the first time in months, everyone in the house slept with real hope for better days. But life had other plans. The next day, an official letter arrived for Richard. Lawrence had filed a lawsuit claiming those old debts and asking for the mansion to be frozen as collateral. "This can't be happening," said Richard, reading and rereading the document. Not now, not when things were starting to get better. Ethan saw the desperation on his father's face and felt something tighten in his chest. He wasn't going to let that man destroy everything they had built. "We're going to fight this, Dad." "How? With what money for lawyers?" "I don't know yet, but we'll find a way." Tyler, who was listening to the conversation from the office door, had an idea. "What if we told everyone what this man is doing? People don't like bad people. If everyone knows he's trying to take your house with fake papers, no one will want to do business with him." "You want us to expose him publicly?" asked Ethan. "Yeah. My grandpa always said that shame is the biggest fear of powerful men." Richard and Ethan exchanged looks. It was a risky idea, but maybe it was the only one they had. "How exactly would we do that?" asked Richard. "We could talk to that journalist who came to do a story on the clinic last week," suggested Ethan. "Tell the whole story. Let people judge. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing." It was a risky plan, but they decided to move forward. Ethan contacted the journalist, a young man named Brian Cooper, who had been impressed with the clinic's work. "That's quite a story," said Brian, when Ethan told him everything. "Let me investigate these documents he's presenting. I have some contacts who might help." While Brian investigated, life at the mansion continued. Ethan practiced walking every day, determined to get completely out of the wheelchair. Every step was a victory, every day standing was a miracle. The community clinic was officially opened a month later. It was small, modest, but functional. It had an equipped office, a cozy waiting room that Tyler had helped decorate with plants, and a small space for basic medications. On opening day, more people showed up than they expected. Not just patients, but curious neighbors, other doctors interested in the model, even some representatives from NGOs working in community health. Ethan worked all day, with Tyler by his side, helping with everything. And the most surprising thing, he did it all standing up. He still needed support, still got tired quickly, but he was standing, no longer in the wheelchair. "Look at you," said Jessica at the end of the day. 6 months ago you couldn't move a finger. Today you spent the whole day seeing patients on your feet. "I wouldn't believe it if I hadn't lived it," said Ethan. "I always believed," commented Tyler, smiling. That night, Brian called Ethan. "You won't believe what I found out. Those documents Lawrence is using? They're fake indeed and not very well done. I found several inconsistencies, but more importantly, I discovered he's doing this because he's bankrupt. He lost everything in bad investments and is trying to rebuild his empire by taking other people's properties based on made-up debts. Can you prove it?" "I can, and I'll publish the story tomorrow." Ethan hung up the phone and went straight to tell his father. Richard, who was in the office surrounded by papers and worries, couldn't believe it. This means we're going to win, Dad. He won't be able to take our house." Richard hugged his son, and for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to cry. They weren't tears of despair, but of relief. Brian's story came out the next day and caused a stir in Boston's business community. Lawrence Wilson was exposed as a fraudster. His questionable practices were revealed, and several other victims started coming forward with similar stories. The lawsuit against Richard was quickly dismissed. Lawrence, with his reputation destroyed, disappeared from the city. They said he had moved to another state, trying to start over somewhere no one knew his name. "It's over," said Richard, reading the dismissal notice. "It's really over." "I told you shame was their biggest fear," said Tyler, proud of his own wisdom. With the threat of Lawrence eliminated, things began to calm down. Richard managed to renegotiate some debts, sell less important properties for fair prices, and started rebuilding his company more consciously. I realized I spent years chasing profit without thinking about the impact of my decisions, he told Ethan in a nighttime conversation. Maybe this whole crisis was necessary to make me see that. Sometimes you need to lose everything to find what really matters, said Ethan. I know that well. Meanwhile, Ethan continued to improve. With 3.5 months of treatment since his first step, he could now walk with the aid of a cane for short distances. The goal now was to walk without any assistance. We're almost there, Tyler would say every day. Soon you'll be able to play ball with me in the yard. Play ball? Let's start with just walking, okay? All right, but I want to play ball one day. Deal. When I'm walking properly, we'll play. The clinic thrived. The model of humane and accessible care attracted local media attention, and soon there were stories about the doctor who healed himself by helping others. Ethan didn't much like the exposure, but he understood it was important to keep the project running. Donations started coming in from unexpected places. Local small business owners, people who had been treated at the clinic and wanted to give back, even some of Ethan's former patients from when he worked at the hospital. You're making a difference, son, said Richard. A real difference in people's lives. It's what I always wanted to do, Dad. It just took me a while to remember that. One day, a woman showed up at the clinic with a boy about 7 years old. The child needed a simple procedure but was terrified of seeing a doctor. Ethan examined the case, saw that he would need to do a small suture on a cut the child had on his leg. The boy was crying, refusing to let anyone come near him. Hey, champ, said Ethan, crouching down to the boy's level. Do you like stories? I do, said the boy between sobs. Then let me tell you one. A few months ago, there was a doctor who couldn't do what he loved most anymore. He was so afraid of making another mistake that his body just stopped working. And as Ethan told his own story, adapting it so the child could understand, he slowly treated the injury. The boy was so focused on the story that he didn't even notice when Ethan finished. There, said Ethan, all taken care of. Already? Asked the boy, surprised. Already? You were very brave. The child's mother was crying. Thank you, she said. Thank you for taking such gentle care of him. When they left, Tyler approached Ethan. That story you told, it was about you, wasn't it? It was. And the boy in the story who helped the doctor, was that me? That was you. Tyler fell silent for a moment, processing. So I'm like, important to your story? Tyler, you're not just important, you're essential. Without you, I'd still be in that chair, staring into space every day. You saved me. But I didn't do anything special. I just was myself. And sometimes that's what someone needs. Someone who's genuine, who believes when everyone else has stopped believing, who doesn't give up even when it seems impossible. Tyler hugged Ethan, and the doctor returned the hug with all his strength. It was then that Ethan realized Tyler wasn't just the boy who had helped him anymore. He was family. He was a brother. He was the person who had taught him the most important life lessons without even realizing he was teaching. The months kept passing. Ethan eventually abandoned the cane and started walking on his own. The first steps without support were shaky, uncertain, but they were steps. He was walking. The clinic grew. They hired another doctor, a nurse, and Tyler officially became the administrative assistant of the place. The boy learned to use the computer, organize files, schedule appointments. It was amazing to see how he absorbed knowledge. Tyler, Ethan said one day, have you ever thought about studying, going to school, taking courses? I have, but I've never been to school. I don't even know how to read properly yet. What if we found a way? There are adult schools that accept people who've never studied. You could start from the basics and work your way up. Tyler's eyes lit up. Really? Do you think I can do it? I'm absolutely sure. Richard, when he heard about the conversation, offered to pay for Tyler's education. Not just basic education, but whatever came after too, if the boy wanted to continue. You saved my son, he said to Tyler. It's the least I can do. Tyler started studying. It was difficult at first. He was years behind other kids his age. But he had determination, and Ethan and Mrs. Margaret helped him with his lessons every night. Gradually, he caught up. Life at the mansion found a new balance. Richard rebuilt his company, this time with more ethical and sustainable practices. Ethan worked at the clinic every day, loving every minute of it. Tyler studied and helped at the clinic in his spare time. Mrs. Margaret took care of everyone as she always had. Rusty, the dog Tyler had found, grew up and became the clinic's official mascot. He had free run of the place, and the patients loved him. 1 year after Ethan and Tyler first met, they held a small celebration in the garden. Everyone was there: Richard, Mrs. Margaret, Jessica, Brian the journalist who was now a family friend, some regular patients from the clinic, and of course, Ethan and Tyler. "A year ago," said Ethan, raising a glass of juice, "I was at the worst point of my life. I couldn't walk, I couldn't work, I couldn't see a future. And then this stubborn boy jumped over my fence asking for food and changed everything." "I'm not stubborn," protested Tyler, but he was smiling. "Yes, you are," everyone said in unison, laughing. "But seriously," Ethan continued, "Tyler taught me that sometimes healing doesn't come from expensive medications or complex treatments. It comes from human connection, from purpose, from believing that tomorrow can be better than today. He gave me back not just my legs, but my life. And for that, I'm eternally grateful." Everyone applauded. Tyler's cheeks were red with embarrassment. He wasn't used to so much positive attention. "Mr. Ethan," he said when the applause died down, "you saved me too. You gave me a family, a home, a chance to study, to be somebody. So I guess we saved each other." "I think you're right," agreed Ethan. Richard watched the scene with a feeling he hadn't had in years: peace. His company was stable, his son was healthy and happy, and he had gained a second son in the process. Tyler hadn't been officially adopted yet, but it was only a matter of time. The boy was part of the family, as much as anyone there. The clinic continued to grow. They expanded their services to include some basic specialties, secured more donations, hired more professionals. It became a regional reference as a model for accessible and humane community healthcare. Ethan returned to teaching at the university, sharing his experience with future doctors. He always ended his lectures by telling Tyler's story, emphasizing that medicine wasn't just about technical knowledge, but about connection, empathy, humanity. Tyler, in turn, discovered he loved studying. He had difficulties, of course. There was a lot to catch up on. But with support and dedication, he progressed. In 2 years, he was at the appropriate level for his age. He talked about becoming a doctor when he grew up. He wanted to follow in Ethan's footsteps. "You can be whatever you want, Tyler," Ethan would say. "A doctor, an engineer, a teacher, whatever you dream of. You have the potential for anything." "But I want to be a doctor. I want to help people like you helped me." "Then let's work to make that happen." Ethan's emotional scars never completely disappeared. He still had occasional nightmares about that day in the operating room, still felt a tightness in his chest when he remembered the boy he couldn't save. But he learned to live with it, to transform the pain into motivation to be better, to make a difference in the lives he could touch. He never returned to working in surgery. He decided his place was at the community clinic, doing preventive medicine and primary care. And he was happy with that choice. One day, 3 years after meeting Tyler, Ethan was working at the clinic when a woman entered with a folder of documents. "Dr. Ethan Parker?" she asked. "Yes, that's me." "My name is Susan Reynolds. I'm a social worker, and I'm here to conduct the home visit regarding the adoption process for Tyler Parker." Ethan smiled. Finally. Richard had started the adoption process a few months ago, and this was the final step before the final decision. "Of course, welcome. Tyler is at school now, but I can show you everything you need." Susan asked questions, examined the house, spoke with Mrs. Margaret, with Tyler's teachers, with people from the community. In the end, she seemed satisfied. "I will recommend the adoption be approved," she said. "Of course, there is a considerable age difference, but the bond between you is evident, and the environment is ideal for Tyler's development." When Tyler returned from school and heard the news, he couldn't hold back his tears. "Am I going to have a real last name? Am I going to be Tyler Parker?" "Go ahead," said Richard, hugging the boy. "If you want to, of course." "I want to. I really do." The adoption was finalized a month later. It was a simple ceremony at the courthouse, but everyone was there. Ethan, Richard, Mrs. Margaret, Jessica, Brian, even some patients from the clinic who had become friends. When the judge banged the gavel and declared Tyler officially the son of Richard Parker, brother of Ethan Parker, there was an explosion of applause in the small room. "Welcome officially to the family," said Ethan, hugging his now brother. "Thank you for letting me be a part of it," replied Tyler. That night, the family celebrated at home. Mrs. Margaret made a special dinner. Rusty got a piece of meat, and everyone stayed up late talking and laughing. "You know," said Richard in a quiet moment of the night, "when Ethan got sick, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd never be happy again, that I had lost my son even though he was still alive. And look at us now." "Things have a way of working out, don't they, Dad?" said Ethan. "Not always the way we expect, but they do. And usually when we least expect it," added Tyler. "Like when I jumped that fence just wanting a piece of bread and ended up gaining a whole family. It was the best bread we ever gave," joked Mrs. Margaret, making everyone laugh. The years went by. The clinic became established as a permanent institution, serving hundreds of people each month. Ethan trained other doctors in the compassionate method he practiced, and the model began to be replicated in other cities. Tyler grew up, becoming an articulate and intelligent teenager. He kept his focus on his studies, always with the goal of medicine on the horizon. Ethan helped him when he could, teaching basic concepts of anatomy and physiology, taking him to observe consultations at the clinic. "You have a knack for this," Ethan would say after Tyler made a great observation about a patient. "You're going to be a better doctor than me." "Impossible," Tyler would reply. "You're the best doctor there is." Richard completely transformed his approach to business. He started investing in projects with social impact, in sustainable companies. The company began to grow again, but now in a conscious and ethical way. "I realized that success without purpose is empty," he said in interviews. "I almost lost everything to learn that lesson, but it was worth it." Mrs. Margaret continued to take care of everyone, as she always had. Now she had 2 sons to spoil since Tyler had become as important to her as Ethan. Jessica became a partner at the clinic, expanding services to include free physical therapy for those who couldn't afford it. She said the work there was the most rewarding she had ever done in her career. And Ethan finally made peace with his past. He visited the grave of the boy he couldn't save, brought flowers, asked for forgiveness, even though he knew he wasn't to blame. He spoke with the child's parents, who had already processed their grief, and didn't blame him for what happened. "These things happen," said the boy's mother, holding Ethan's hand. "You did everything you could, and I've heard about your work at the clinic. My son would be happy to know you're helping so many children now." It was the closure Ethan needed to move forward completely. Years later, when Tyler was graduating from high school with excellent grades, he gave a speech at the graduation, and when it was his turn to speak, he told a story. "When I was little, I lived on the streets," he began, and there was a surprised murmur in the audience. "I had no family, no home, no future. One day I jumped the fence of a mansion just because I was hungry, and there I found a man in a wheelchair, as lost as I was, as broken as I was." He looked at Ethan, who was in the audience with Richard and Mrs. Margaret. "I helped him walk again. At least that's what everyone says. But the truth is, we helped each other. He gave me a reason to exist, and I gave him a reason to get up. And together we built something neither of us could have alone, a real family." There were many people crying in the audience. Ethan was crying. Richard was crying. Even Mrs. Margaret, who always said crying was for special occasions, was crying. "So my message to you today," Tyler continued, "is that no matter how broken you are, no matter how impossible the situation seems, with help, with love, with purpose, it's possible to rebuild yourself. I am proof of that. My brother Ethan is proof of that. And I hope that one day when I become a doctor, I can be proof of that for other people too." The applause was deafening. After the graduation, the family returned home. The mansion was just as it had always been, but at the same time completely different. The garden where Ethan used to stare into emptiness now had a sign: New Hope Community Clinic. "You know what's funny?" said Ethan, looking at the clinic. "When all this started, I just wanted to be able to walk again. I thought that would solve all my problems, but in the end, walking was just the beginning. What really changed my life was finding a purpose, a reason to use these legs." "And what is your reason now?" asked Tyler. "To help. It has always been to help. I just needed to remember that." "And what is mine?" Ethan smiled, putting his arm around his brother's shoulders. "You'll find out, but I'm sure it will be something big." And it really was. Tyler got into medical school 2 years later, at the top of the acceptance list. It was one of the biggest celebrations the family had ever had. Ethan was so proud he couldn't stop telling everyone he knew. "This is my brother, Tyler. He's going to be a doctor. A better doctor than me, even." Tyler always laughed at these exaggerated proclamations, but deep down he loved it. He never imagined he would have someone so proud of him, someone to call a real family. During college, Tyler interned at the clinic. He learned from Ethan not just technical medicine, but human medicine. How to talk to patients, how to show empathy, how to make someone feel seen and cared for. "You're just like me when I was young," said Ethan, watching Tyler attend to an elderly lady with endless patience. "Only better." "I learned from the best," replied Tyler. When Tyler was in his 4th year of college, Ethan received an unexpected call. It was from a big hospital in New York City, offering him the head of the community medicine department they were creating. "It's an honor," Ethan told the director, "but I'll have to decline." "May I ask why?" "It's an extremely prestigious position. Because my place is here, in my clinic, with my family, with my community. Prestige means nothing if you're not doing what you love where you love to do it." When he told the family about the declined offer, he expected Richard to be disappointed, but his father just smiled. "I spent years chasing prestige and status," he said. "I nearly destroyed everything in the process. I'm glad you learned that lesson earlier than I did." The clinic remained the center of Ethan's life. He saw patients every day, trained medical students, gave talks on humanizing healthcare. He was happy in a simple but profound way. Tyler graduated from medical school with honors. At the graduation, he dedicated everything to Ethan. "My brother taught me that being a doctor isn't about status or money," he said. "It's about being there in someone's worst moments and making those moments a little better. It's about caring not just for the body, but for the whole person. It's about remembering that behind every patient there's a story, a family, a life." He started working at the clinic alongside Ethan. Brothers in life and in profession. They worked together, discussed cases, taught each other. It was the perfect partnership. Richard, nearly 65, decided to retire from business. He handed over the company's management to trusted people and dedicated his time to social projects. He created a foundation that supported community health initiatives across the country, inspired by his son's clinic. "I spent my life building an empire," he said in an interview. "But my true legacy is my sons and the work they do." Mrs. Margaret, over 70, finally agreed to retire. But she didn't leave the mansion. It was where she always wanted to be. She began tending the garden, making sweets for the clinic's patients, and telling stories to the children who came for appointments. "This house saw me arrive young and will see me leave old," she would say, "and I don't regret a single second." Rusty, the dog, lived to be 15 and passed away peacefully, sleeping in the garden he loved so much. Everyone cried because he had been an important part of the journey, but they also cried, grateful for the time they had with him. Ethan never married, never had biological children, but he had Tyler, he had his patients, he had his community, and that was more than enough for a full life. Tyler, on the other hand, found love a few years after graduating, a nurse named Amber who worked at the clinic. They married in the mansion's garden, where it all began, with Ethan as the best man and Richard walking the bride down the aisle since she had no father present. "This family has a way of growing," Ethan joked at the wedding. "It started with me and my dad. Now we're 4, soon we'll be 6, 8, 10. And it really did grow." Tyler and Amber had 2 children, a boy and a girl, who grew up running around that garden just as Ethan had done decades before. The clinic expanded to include a health education program, community workshops, support groups. It became much more than a place for medical care. It became a full-fledged community center. "You know," Tyler said one day years later, "I still remember the day I jumped that wall. I was so scared, so desperate. If someone had told me that would change my whole life, I wouldn't have believed it." "I remember too," said Ethan. "And if someone had told me that an 8-year-old boy would teach me more about medicine than all my years in medical school, I would have laughed." We saved each other, didn't we? We did. And we keep saving each other every day. The years passed, as years do. Richard aged gracefully, enjoying his grandchildren, proud of his sons. Mrs. Margaret passed away peacefully at 82, sleeping in the same house where she had spent the last decades, surrounded by everyone she loved. Ethan continued working at the clinic until he was quite old, refusing to retire completely. Tyler took over most of the management, but Ethan went every day, even if it was just to talk with patients, tell stories, be present. The story of the doctor who was healed by a street boy became a legend in the community. Parents told their children, who told their grandchildren. The clinic became a local treasure, protected and valued by everyone. And on a Sunday afternoon, many years after it all began, Ethan was sitting in the garden, in the same spot where he had met Tyler. He was old now, with completely white hair, his body tired from decades well lived. Tyler sat down beside him, his own hair beginning to grey. "What are you thinking about?" asked Tyler. "About how funny fate is," replied Ethan. "If you hadn't jumped that wall, if I hadn't asked Mrs. Margaret to let you stay, if we had done anything different at any point, none of this would exist. But it happened, and look what we built. What you built, Tyler. You were the catalyst for everything. No, it was both of us. It's always been both of us." Ethan looked at his brother, at the man that street kid had become. A respected doctor, a loving father, an exceptional human being. "You know I don't regret anything, right?" said Ethan. "Not even the accident that put me in this chair, because without it, I might never have met you." "I don't regret anything either," said Tyler. "All the hardships, all the suffering, everything brought me here, to you, to this family." They stayed silent for a moment, just enjoying the afternoon, the garden, the life they had built together. "You know what my grandpa used to say?" asked Tyler after a while. "What?" "That the best things in life come when you least expect them, from the most unlikely places, and that no story is truly over as long as there's still love and hope. Your grandpa was really very wise. He was, and if he were here, I think he'd be proud of how his wisdom has spread." Ethan smiled. He looked around, at the clinic operating, at the patients coming and going, at Tyler's grandchildren playing on the grass, at everything that place represented. He had started as a broken man in a wheelchair, without hope, without a future, and now he was here, surrounded by love, by purpose, by a life worth living. "Thank you, Tyler," he said, his voice choked up, "for saving me." "Thank you for letting me save you," replied Tyler, hugging his brother. And as the sun set over that garden that had witnessed so much transformation, the two brothers stood there together, grateful for all the winding paths that had led them to each other. Because in the end, it didn't matter how the journey had begun, it mattered where it had led them, to a place of love, healing, and hope. To a place they had built together, brick by brick, step by step, day after day. A place they could call home. End of story. And you, what did you think of this story of overcoming and family? Have you ever been through a difficult time where someone unexpected made all the difference? Share in the comments. If you were moved by Ethan and Tyler, leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories.